John DeLorean liked the idea of a low-cost muscle car, but his orders were clear. Start with Pontiac's best engine and build around that. What the designers came up with on their second try was quite a bit different. The first thing to go was the two-door sedan body. This new GTO would be offered only in the two-door hardtop and the convertible. Next, the bench seat was out, and the GTO's plush bucket seats were back in. The design team went right down the line, putting back the elements that made a GTO, like the Endura front bumper and the GTO hood with the scoops. By the time they were done, the only cost-saving measure that remained from the original design was the absence of trim rings on the rally wheels. What had started out to be a low-cost GTO turned out in the final design to be the most expensive GTO you could buy. DeLorean's command to get that 350 engine out of there was met with immediate and enthusiastic reaction. The designers didn't just replace it with the 400 cubic inch engine, they went all the way and put in the two brawniest 400s in Pontiac's inventory.
Standard engine on the GTO Judge was a 400 cubic inch Ram Air 3, they called it. And it was strong, but it wasn't as strong as the optional Ram Air 4, which is really a state-of-the-art V8 at that time. It had superior head design, superior exhaust manifolds, and if you drove the car right, you could really scream into the low 13s through the quarter mile.
Pontiac's Ram Air engines had been developed from the early Super Duty and high-output power plants. All GTOs had sported hood scoops, but the only ones that actually worked were the Ram Air scoops.
The Ram Air system consisted of three major components. You had an upper pan which bolted to the bottom side of the hood, which contained flapper valves which fit actually inside the hood scoops themselves, which open and shut. They were actuated by a pull cable underneath the driver's side dashboard, and when the driver opened these hood scoops, it fed cold air directly from the scoops right down into a lower pan which fit over the carburetor and sealed to the bottom of the hood with a piece of foam rubber. And it was a really catchy little device. It was worth about 5 horsepower maybe.
There were two versions of the Ram Air 400 available for the Judge in 1969. The Ram Air 3, rated at 366 horsepower, and the Ram Air 4, rated at 370 horsepower.
The Ram Air 4 is equipped with a little bit different engine components, and it seems to run quite a lot better than the Ram Air 3.
The Ram Air 4 cylinder heads were redesigned with large, round exhaust ports, which improved exhaust flow. The Ram Air 4 cam was a little wilder than the 3's, and it made its peak horsepower at 5,500 RPM versus the 3's 5,100 RPM. Both engines were rated at 445 foot-pounds of torque.
You really couldn't tell a Ram Air 3 from a Ram Air 4 engine just by walking by and looking under the hood. It was they were absolutely identical. The Ram Air 4 heads had different casting numbers on them. If you knew where to look there, you could tell. But other than that, if you wanted to tell the difference between a Ram Air 3 and a Ram Air 4, you had to go back behind the car and listen. The Ram Air 4 had an idle that you just, you know, it was the sexiest, most aggressive idle that you'd ever heard in your entire life. Every Pontiac owner loves to hear a Ram Air 4 car.
So now the new idea committee went back to DeLorean with this redesigned version of the GTO ET, which no longer bore any resemblance to the Roadrunner or any other cheap car for that matter. The ET was now GTO through and through, and it was loaded down with the most expensive hardware as standard equipment. For a final touch, they chose an unforgettable color scheme.
One of the most exciting aspects of it visually was the paint, which was called Carousel Red, which was a Firebird color in 1969. It wasn't offered on the GTO. So they chose that because it was a very wild, bright paint scheme. And they went through several different designs on the striping that went on the side.
Well, as the story goes, this time when DeLorean got to drive the car and saw the entire concept, he was all smiles. He loved it. He said, yeah, this is exactly what we ought to be doing here. But I'm not crazy about this ET nickname, though. He said, I think what we ought to do is call it the Judge. I mean, there's this guy on TV that constantly saying, here comes the Judge. Well, let's give him the Judge.
The final element was now in place, the catchy name. Thus was born the ultimate GTO, the Judge, the wildest muscle car anyone had ever seen. And just like the 1964 GTO, it had to prove itself to a skeptical automotive press corps. Stay with us as America discovers the Judge on the American Muscle Car.